The afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains of Margaret Martinez's modest Cincinnati home, casting delicate shadows across the worn carpet where 3-year-old Emma sat. The little girl who once couldn't stop singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" now sat silent as stone, her hazel eyes fixed on something no one else could see. A collection of colorful dolls surrounded her, gifts from well-meaning relatives trying to coax out just one word, one smile, one sign that the real Emma was still in there somewhere. But Emma hadn't spoken in 187 days. Margaret stood in the kitchen doorway, gripping a coffee mug with trembling hands as she watched her granddaughter. The woman who'd raised 3 children and thought she'd seen everything found herself completely helpless. Every morning, she'd wake up hoping today would be different. Every night, she'd cry herself to sleep knowing it wasn't. "Emma, sweetie," Margaret's voice was gentle, practiced. "Would you like some apple slices, the ones with peanut butter just how you like them?" Nothing, not even a blink of acknowledgement. Dr. Patricia Chen, the 3rd child psychologist they'd consulted, had been frank during last week's session. "Mrs. Martinez, Emma has witnessed something so traumatic that her mind has essentially shut down her ability to communicate. It's a protective mechanism. She's trapped inside herself, and without knowing what triggered this, I can't promise she'll ever speak again." The words had felt like a death sentence. It had started 6 months ago, on an ordinary Tuesday that turned into a nightmare. Margaret had arrived to pick Emma up from her son Marcus's house and found the toddler huddled in the corner of her bedroom closet, bruises blooming like dark flowers across her tiny arms and legs. Her daughter-in-law, Lisa, had been at work. Marcus had been at his construction site, with time cards and witnesses to prove it. But someone had hurt Emma. Someone had hurt her badly enough that the light went out in her eyes. The police came. The questions started, and Emma, who'd been chattering about her new purple crayon just days before, went completely silent. Detective James Rodriguez had been patient, kneeling down to Emma's level with his notebook tucked away. "Can you tell me who did this, sweetheart? Was it Daddy? You can tell me. Daddy won't be mad." Emma had stared right through him. They tried everything over the following weeks. Play therapy, where Emma was supposed to use dolls to show what happened. She just sat motionless, holding a stuffed rabbit. Art therapy, where she was given crayons and paper. She drew nothing but black scribbles. Music therapy, sandbox therapy, even animal-assisted therapy with a golden retriever named Sunshine. Emma would sometimes pet the dog, but she never spoke, never pointed, never gave them anything to work with. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in county jail. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. He'd been the only adult home, the injuries occurred in his house, and Emma wouldn't, or couldn't, say otherwise. His attorney, a overworked public defender named Tom Chen, had filed motion after motion for dismissal, arguing that without Emma's testimony or physical evidence linking Marcus to the crime, the case should be thrown out. But prosecutor James Chen wasn't ready to give up. Something in his gut told him they were missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. Emma's silence wasn't protecting her father, it was something else, something darker. "Mrs. Martinez," the voice on the phone last Tuesday had been urgent. It was Sarah Mitchell, a detective from the K-9 unit. "I've been following Emma's case and I have an unconventional idea. Have you heard of courthouse facility dogs?" Margaret hadn't, but she'd listened as Detective Mitchell explained how specially trained dogs could help traumatized witnesses, especially children, feel safe enough to testify. These weren't pets. They were highly trained professionals who could sense anxiety and provide comfort without judgment. "His name is Kane," Detective Mitchell had said, warmth evident in her voice. "He's a 3-year-old German Shepherd, and he's helped 12 children find their voices in the past year. I can't promise anything, but, Mrs. Martinez, I've seen miracles happen when a scared child meets the right dog." Margaret had been skeptical. How could a dog succeed where trained psychologists had failed? But desperation makes you consider options you'd normally dismiss. She'd agreed to let Emma meet Kane in a controlled environment before any courtroom appearance. Now, as Margaret watched her silent granddaughter, she wondered if she was grasping at straws. The meeting was scheduled for tomorrow at the Children's Advocacy Center downtown. Part of her feared getting her hopes up. The other part, the part that remembered Emma's giggles, her off-key singing, her endless questions about why the sky was blue and where butterflies slept, that part was willing to try anything. "Emma," Margaret said softly, setting down her coffee and sitting on the floor beside her granddaughter. She didn't expect a response anymore, but she couldn't stop trying. "Tomorrow we're going to meet someone special, a really nice dog named Kane. Would you like that?" For just a fraction of a second, Emma's eyes shifted, not toward her grandmother but toward the window, where a neighbor's golden retriever was visible in the yard next door. It was the smallest reaction, barely perceptible, but Margaret's heart leaped. Maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. In his cell at the Hamilton County Justice Center, Marcus Martinez sat on his thin mattress, his head in his hands. He'd lost his job, his reputation, and worst of all, his daughter seemed to think he was a monster. His best friend Bobby Sullivan visited every week, bringing encouragement and promises that the truth would come out. But as the days turned into months, Marcus was losing faith. He had no idea that tomorrow would change everything. He had no idea that the truth was about to come from the most unexpected source, a police dog who could unlock secrets that humans had failed to discover. And he had no idea that the person he trusted most in the world was actually the monster who'd stolen his daughter's voice. The sun set over Cincinnati, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In courtrooms, jail cells, and living rooms across the city, people waited. They waited for justice. They waited for truth. They waited for a miracle. Tomorrow, that miracle would arrive on 4 paws. Detective Sarah Mitchell's alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., but she was already awake. She'd been lying in bed for the past hour, thinking about Emma Martinez and the weight of what today could mean. Beside her bed, in his specially designated sleeping area, Kane lifted his head, his dark eyes catching the dim light filtering through the curtains. "Morning, partner," Sarah whispered, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. The German shepherd's tail thumped once against the floor, his way of saying good morning without disturbing the quiet of dawn. Kane wasn't just a police dog. He wasn't even just Sarah's partner. He was a miracle wrapped in fur, and today might be the day he performed his greatest act yet. Sarah swung her legs out of bed and padded to the kitchen, Kane following at her heels with the precision of a shadow. As she prepared his breakfast, a carefully measured mixture of high-protein kibble and supplements, she found herself thinking back to the day they'd met 3 years ago. The K-9 training facility in Columbus had been chaos that day. 15 dogs barking, handlers shouting commands, the sharp whistle blasts cutting through the air. Sarah had been skeptical about the whole program. She'd spent 12 years as a detective in narcotics, working human informants and breaking trafficking rings. The idea of partnering with a dog had seemed like a step backward, a gimmick the department was trying because it looked good in the media. Then she'd met Kane. He'd been 2 years old, already trained in basic police work but showing signs of something more. While the other dogs focused on their handlers, barking and straining at their leads, Kane had been watching everything with an almost human intelligence. When a training officer had deliberately dropped his keys, Kane had picked them up and returned them without being asked. When a young recruit had stumbled and fallen, Kane had immediately moved to his side, pressing against him until the man's breathing steadied. "That one's special," Master Trainer Robert Hayes had said, nodding toward Kane. "He's got what we call elevated emotional intelligence. We've been testing him for facility dog certification. You know, the program where dogs help traumatized witnesses in court." Sarah had laughed. "You want me to be a therapy dog handler? I bust drug dealers, Hayes." "No," Hayes had replied seriously. "I want you to save lives in a different way. This dog could help put away criminals that the system can't touch because victims are too scared to talk, especially kids. That conversation had changed everything. Now, 3 years later, Kane had 12 successful cases under his collar. 12 children who'd been too terrified to speak had found their voices with his help. But Emma Martinez's case was different. The silence had lasted longer. The trauma ran deeper. And the stakes, a potentially innocent man in jail, a real predator possibly walking free, had never been higher. Sarah drove to the K-9 unit headquarters, Kane sitting calmly in his specially designed compartment in the back of her SUV. Other dogs barked when they arrived at the facility, but Kane simply waited for Sarah to open his door, then jumped out with fluid grace. "Big day, Mitchell," Officer Tom Reeves called from across the parking lot, his Belgian Malinois, Ace, straining at the lead beside him. "Could be," Sarah replied, not wanting to jinx it. Inside the training center, she put Kane through his morning routine. Physical conditioning came first, agility courses that kept him sharp and fit. Then scent work, even though today's assignment didn't require it. Sarah believed in maintaining all of Kane's skills, even the ones not actively in use. But the real training, the part that made Kane special, came next. Sarah led him to what they called the scenario room, a space designed to mimic various environments where Kane might work. Today, she'd set it up to resemble a child's playroom. Stuffed animals, colorful blocks, and child-sized furniture filled the space. She pressed play on a recording. A child's voice, high and frightened, filled the room. "I'm scared. I don't want to talk about it." Kane's ears perked up, but he didn't move. He'd learned to associate that tone with his job. "Fine," Sarah commanded softly. Kane moved into the room, navigating between toys until he reached a doll sitting in the corner. He lay down beside it, his head on his paws, his eyes soft. This was his signature move, the non-threatening approach that told traumatized children he was safe, that he understood fear, that he wouldn't hurt them. Sarah felt her throat tighten with pride. 3 years of training, hundreds of hours of certification courses, and countless real-world applications had made Kane into something extraordinary. He could read body language better than most humans. He knew when to approach and when to give space. He understood that sometimes silence needed to be met with silence. But Kane's gift went deeper than training. Some dogs were just born with an extra sense about human pain. Sarah had seen it time and time again. The way Kane would focus on the most frightened person in a room, the way he'd lean against someone having a panic attack, the way he'd rest his head on a crying child's lap with perfect, gentle pressure. Last month, a 7-year-old named Tommy had been too terrified to identify his abuser in a lineup. The boy had shut down completely, rocking back and forth, pulling at his hair. The prosecutor was ready to drop the case. Then Sarah brought Kane in. The dog had simply walked to Tommy and sat down, pressing his side against the boy's leg. For 20 minutes they sat like that. Then Tommy had whispered, "The dog makes me feel brave." 10 minutes later, he'd identified his abuser with certainty. The conviction had been swift. Now, as Sarah checked her watch, she felt the familiar mixture of hope and anxiety that came before every case. In 2 hours, they'd meet Emma Martinez at the Children's Advocacy Center. A little girl who hadn't spoken in 187 days would either find her voice or retreat further into silence. Sarah packed Kane's go-bag, water bowl, treats, his official courthouse vest, and his certification papers. She included his favorite toy, a worn rope that he'd had since puppyhood, just in case Emma wanted to play. Some children connected through play before they connected through words. "Ready, boy?" Sarah asked, kneeling down to look Kane in the eyes. The German shepherd's tail wagged once slowly. In dog language, that was a yes. As they drove across Cincinnati toward the Advocacy Center, Sarah talked to Kane the way she always did before a big case. Some handlers thought it was silly, talking to a dog like it was human, but Sarah knew better. Kane understood far more than most people gave him credit for. "There's a little girl who needs you today," she said, watching Kane's reflection in the rearview mirror. "She's been hurt and she's scared and she doesn't know how to tell anyone what happened. But you're going to help her, aren't you?" Kane's ears twitched forward. "That's right. You're going to show her that she's safe, that she can trust someone, that her voice matters." 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of the Hamilton County Children's Advocacy Center. The building was designed to be non-threatening. Colorful murals covered the walls, and the entrance looked more like a daycare than a government facility. Margaret Martinez's car was already there. Sarah took a deep breath, clipped Kane's official vest into place, and stepped out of the vehicle. The vest was important. It signaled to everyone that Kane was working, that he was a professional doing a job. As they walked toward the entrance, Sarah felt Kane's energy shift. He knew. Somehow, he always knew when a case was important. His steps became more measured, his focus more intense. This wasn't the playful dog who chased tennis balls at home. This was Officer Kane, courthouse facility dog, ready to do what he did best. Ready to help a broken child find her voice. Inside, Margaret Martinez sat in the waiting room, Emma small and silent beside her. When they saw Kane, everything changed. Emma's eyes, dead and distant for months, suddenly focused. And for the first time in 187 days, something like recognition flickered across her face. The waiting room of the Hamilton County Children's Advocacy Center smelled like crayons and vanilla air freshener, a deliberate choice to make frightened children feel safe. Colorful fish swam across the walls in painted murals, and soft music played from hidden speakers. But none of it had reached Emma Martinez until this moment. Margaret Martinez noticed the change immediately. Her granddaughter, who'd been staring at her shoes for the past 20 minutes, suddenly sat up straighter. Those hazel eyes that had been empty for so long now tracked something across the room with laser focus. "Kane." The German Shepherd entered through the main door with Detective Sarah Mitchell at his side, and it was as if someone had flipped a switch inside Emma. The little girl didn't speak. She still couldn't, but her entire body language shifted. Her hands unclenched. Her breathing changed. For the first time in 187 days, Emma looked alive. "Mrs. Martinez," Sarah approached with a warm smile, keeping Kane on a loose lead beside her. "I'm Detective Mitchell, and this is Kane." Margaret stood, her hand instinctively reaching for Emma's shoulder. "Thank you for coming. I don't know if this will work, but—" "Let's not put pressure on it," Sarah interrupted gently. She'd learned over the years that expectations could sabotage these sessions. "We're just here to meet Emma. Whatever happens, happens." Sarah had studied Emma's case file for weeks. She knew about the bruises, the silence, the father in jail, and the prosecutor's desperation. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, there was only a traumatized 3-year-old who needed to know she was safe. "Emma," Sarah said softly, crouching down to the girl's level but maintaining distance. "This is my friend Kane. He's a very special dog who helps children feel brave. Would you like to meet him?" Emma's lips parted slightly, but no sound emerged. Her eyes never left Kane. Sarah had worked with enough traumatized children to read the signs. Emma wanted to approach, but fear held her back. Fear that had been planted deep, fear that had stolen her voice, fear that made every interaction feel dangerous. "Tell you what," Sarah said, her voice casual and unhurried. "Kane and I are going to sit over here by the toys. You can come over whenever you're ready, or not at all. Kane's very patient." With that, Sarah stood and walked to the far side of the room, where foam mats covered the floor and stuffed animals sat in a wooden bin. She unclipped Kane's lead and gave him a subtle hand signal. The German Shepherd knew exactly what to do. Kane began what Sarah called his assessment routine. He walked slowly around the perimeter of the room, sniffing the baseboards with apparent fascination. To an untrained observer, he looked like any dog exploring a new space. But this was calculated. Kane was making himself familiar, non-threatening, predictable. He was showing Emma that he wasn't going to rush her, wasn't going to invade her space, wasn't going to hurt her. Margaret whispered to Sarah, "She hasn't shown interest in anything for months. Not toys, not food, not even her favorite cartoons." "Trauma does that," Sarah replied quietly. "It makes the world feel dangerous, so the mind shuts down to protect itself. But dogs exist outside that threat system. They don't judge, they don't lie. For a child whose trust has been shattered, that can be everything." 10 minutes passed. Kane had completed his circuit of the room and now lay down near the toy bin, his body relaxed but his eyes watchful. He'd positioned himself so Emma could see his face. Dogs knew instinctively that eye contact built connection. Emma shifted on the bench beside her grandmother. Her small hands gripped the edge of the seat. "It's okay, sweetie," Margaret murmured. "The doggy is nice." But Emma didn't need encouragement. Something deeper was happening. Sarah watched, barely breathing, as the little girl slid off the bench. Her pink sneakers touched the floor. She took one hesitant step forward. Kane's tail gave a single, gentle wag. Emma froze. Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her face neutral. This was the critical moment. Would Emma interpret the tail wag as threatening or inviting? Another step, then another. Kane remained perfectly still, only his eyes tracking Emma's approach. Years of training had taught him to read micro-expressions, to sense the exact level of approach a traumatized person could handle. When Emma was about 5 feet away, Kane lowered his head onto his paws, a submissive posture that said, "I'm not a threat. You're in control." Emma stopped. For a long moment nothing happened. The room held its breath. Then Emma did something that made Margaret gasp. She sat down on the floor, her legs crossed, still 5 feet from Kane. She wasn't touching him, but she wasn't running away either. She was simply being near him. Sarah exchanged a glance with Margaret. This was progress. This was huge. 20 minutes passed in silence. Emma sat, Kane lay still, the adults waited. Then Emma's stuffed rabbit, which she'd been clutching since they arrived, slipped from her grip. It rolled across the smooth floor, coming to rest against Kane's front paw. What happened next brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Kane looked at the stuffed rabbit, then at Emma. Slowly, carefully, he reached out with his nose and pushed the toy back toward the little girl. Not all the way, just close enough that she'd have to move slightly to reach it. It was an invitation. Emma's hand stretched forward. Her fingers touched the rabbit's worn ear. Then, almost imperceptibly, they moved further. They brushed against Kane's paw. The German shepherd didn't move. He barely breathed. He understood this moment was sacred. Emma's whole hand now rested on Kane's paw. The warmth of his fur, the solidness of his presence, the absolute stillness of his acceptance. It was everything her shattered world had been missing. 42 minutes after entering the room, Emma began to move closer. Inch by inch, she crawled forward until she was sitting right beside Kane. Her small body pressed against his larger one, and finally, she buried her face in his thick fur. Sarah saw the little girl's shoulders shake. Emma was crying, the first tears in months. Margaret started to stand, maternal instinct urging her to comfort her granddaughter, but Sarah held up a hand. "Let Kane do his job," she whispered. Kane's response was pure instinct and training perfectly merged. He shifted his position, curling his body slightly around Emma, creating a cocoon of warmth and safety. His head moved to rest gently against her back, not pinning her, just letting her know he was there. For 3 hours they stayed like that. Girl and dog, trauma and healing, silence and understanding. Emma didn't speak, but she didn't let go either. Sarah pulled out her phone and texted Prosecutor James Chen. "She's connecting with Kane. Prepare for the courtroom session. There's something here." Margaret wiped tears from her eyes. "I've tried everything. Doctors, therapists, specialists, and a dog. A dog is what reaches her." "Not just any dog," Sarah said softly. "The right dog. Kane has something special. He's helped 12 other children find their voices. Emma will be number 13. As the afternoon sun shifted across the room, Emma finally lifted her head from Kane's fur. Her eyes were red from crying, but they were clear, clearer than Margaret had seen them in months. Emma looked at Kane, really looked at him, and something passed between child and animal that transcended words. Emma's hand moved to Kane's face, touching his muzzle with gentle reverence. Kane's tail wagged slowly, a metronome of patience and love. "Tomorrow," Sarah said to Margaret, "we bring them to the courthouse. If Emma can feel this safe with Kane beside her, she might be able to show us what happened. She might be able to point to the truth." Margaret nodded, hope and fear warring in her chest. What if she can't? Sarah looked at Emma, who was now stroking Kane's ears with both hands, a ghost of a smile playing at her lips. "She will," Sarah said with quiet certainty, "because Kane will be right there with her, and that dog has never let a child down." When it was time to leave, Emma didn't want to let go of Kane. She clung to his fur, panic rising in her eyes at the thought of separation. Sarah made a decision. "Kane and I will walk you to your car, and tomorrow when you come to the courthouse, Kane will be the first thing you see. I promise." Emma's grip loosened slightly. She looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and gave the smallest nod. It wasn't a word, but it was communication. It was a beginning. As they walked to the parking lot, Emma's hand rested on Kane's back the entire way. The German Shepherd matched his pace to her tiny steps, never pulling ahead, never lagging behind. When Margaret's car pulled away, Emma's face was pressed against the window, watching Kane until they turned the corner and disappeared from sight. Sarah knelt beside her partner, scratching behind his ears. "Good boy, Kane. Such a good boy. One more day and we're going to change that little girl's life." Kane's tail wagged. He knew, somehow he always knew. Tomorrow, the real miracle would begin. The Hamilton County Courthouse had never felt so oppressive. Even Judge Richard Thompson, who'd presided over thousands of cases in his 32 years on the bench, could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on the courtroom like a physical force. It was 9:47 a.m. on a gray September morning, and the gallery was packed beyond capacity. News vans lined the street outside. Reporters had been camped since dawn, their cameras trained on every entrance. The case had captured national attention. "Mute toddler holds key to father's fate," read the headline in that morning's Cincinnati Enquirer. "Will 3-year-old finally speak?" asked the local news ticker. But inside courtroom 6, the people who truly mattered were locked in their own private hells. Marcus Martinez sat at the defense table, his orange jail jumpsuit a stark contrast to his attorney's pressed gray suit. 8 months in county jail had hollowed him out. The muscular construction worker who'd once coached Little League now looked skeletal, his eyes sunken, his hands trembling as they rested on the table. His best friend Bobby Sullivan sat directly behind him in the first row of the gallery, leaning forward to squeeze Marcus's shoulder in support. "Today's the day, brother," Bobby whispered. "Emma's gonna clear your name, I know it." Marcus nodded, but doubt clouded his features. His daughter hadn't looked at him in months. The few times he'd seen her during supervised visits, she'd hidden behind her grandmother, refusing to acknowledge his existence. Whatever she'd witnessed had convinced her that her own father was a monster. Across the aisle, Prosecutor James Chen shuffled papers with more force than necessary. His case was disintegrating. Without Emma's testimony, without physical evidence linking Marcus to the crime, the judge would have no choice but to dismiss. Chen had gambled everything on this facility dog intervention, a strategy his boss had called desperate and potentially embarrassing. "If this doesn't work," his supervisor had warned, "your career takes the hit, not mine." Chen glanced at Detective Sarah Mitchell, who sat in the front row with Kane lying calmly at her feet. The German Shepherd wore his official courthouse vest, the words "Facility Dog" emblazoned across his sides. The dog seemed utterly unbothered by the tension, his brown eyes scanning the room with professional detachment. "You sure about this?" Chen whispered to Sarah during a brief recess. "I'm never sure," Sarah admitted, "but I'm hopeful. Emma connected with Kane yesterday, really connected, if she can feel that same safety today." She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what was at stake. Defense attorney Tom Reynolds stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, this is unprecedented and prejudicial. Bringing a dog into the courtroom is nothing more than a theatrical stunt designed to sway emotions rather than present facts. I move to exclude." "Motion denied," Judge Thompson interrupted, his voice brooking no argument. "I've reviewed the research on facility dogs, Mr. Reynolds. 12 federal circuit courts have approved their use. If this child needs a dog to feel safe enough to communicate, then she'll have one. This court is interested in truth, not your objections." Reynolds sat down, his jaw clenched. He'd been confident this morning. Now uncertainty crept in. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs. "All rise for the witness." The courtroom fell silent. Every eye turned to the door. Margaret Martinez entered first, her arm around Emma's small shoulders. The little girl wore a yellow dress, her favorite color, the one thing Margaret had been able to get her to care about. But Emma's face was blank, her eyes downcast, her body rigid with tension. She took 3 steps into the courtroom and froze. The sheer size of the space overwhelmed her. The high ceilings, the wood paneling, the rows of strangers staring at her. It was too much. Emma's breathing quickened, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Margaret felt her granddaughter's body begin to shake. "It's okay, baby," Margaret whispered, but her voice trembled too. "Just a few more steps." Emma's legs wouldn't move. Panic was setting in, the same panic that had kept her silent for 187 days. The trauma was flooding back, drowning her in fear and memory. Her small hands clutched her stuffed rabbit so tightly that her knuckles turned white. In the gallery, Bobby Sullivan leaned forward, watching intently. His face showed concern, but his eyes were calculating, cold. He'd attended every preliminary hearing, every motion, every conference, always supporting Marcus, always watching Emma. Marcus turned to look at his daughter, tears streaming down his face. "Emma," he called softly, "baby girl, it's Daddy, I love you." But Emma's eyes glazed over at the sound of his voice. She stepped backward, trying to retreat, trying to escape. The courtroom held its collective breath. This was falling apart. Judge Thompson leaned forward, ready to call a recess, to spare the child further trauma. Then Emma saw him. "Kane." The German Shepherd sat beside Detective Mitchell in the front row, 30 feet from where Emma stood frozen. The moment Emma's eyes locked onto that familiar brown fur, that gentle face, that steadfast presence, something shifted. Kane's ears perked forward. He recognized her immediately. Sarah saw the change in both of them, the dog's focused attention, the girl's desperate hope. She gave Kane the subtle hand signal they'd practiced 1,000 times. "Go to work." Kane stood smoothly and began walking toward Emma. Not rushing, not pulling on the lead, just moving with calm, deliberate purpose. Each step was measured, professional, perfect. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the police dog crossed the space between hope and despair. Emma's breathing began to slow. Her death grip on the rabbit loosened slightly. As Kane approached, covering the distance with gentle confidence, color returned to Emma's face. 10 feet away, 5 feet, 3 feet. Kane stopped directly in front of Emma and sat, looking up at her with those impossibly understanding eyes. His tail gave one gentle wag. Emma released her grandmother's hand. The entire courtroom gasped as the little girl who hadn't voluntarily touched anyone in months reached out with both hands and buried them in Kane's thick fur. She dropped to her knees, pressing her face against the dog's neck, and Kane stood perfectly still, accepting her weight, her fear, her need. "That's it, sweetheart," Sarah said softly, kneeling beside them. "Kane's got you, you're safe now." Margaret wiped tears from her eyes, her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. Marcus smiled for the first time in months, seeing his daughter show emotion, show life. But Bobby Sullivan's face had gone pale. A sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. His hands gripped the wooden bench in front of him. Judge Thompson cleared his throat. "Bailiff, help the witness to the stand. The dog may accompany her." It took 5 minutes to get Emma situated in the witness box, which had been modified with a step stool for small children. Kane lay at her feet, his body pressed against her legs, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. The courtroom was so quiet that the tick of the wall clock sounded like thunder. Prosecutor Chen approached slowly, his voice gentle. "Emma, my name is Mr. Chen. Nobody here is going to hurt you. Do you understand?" Emma's hand moved from Kane's head to his ear, stroking rhythmically. She didn't respond, but her eyes tracked Chen's movement. "Emma, we just need to know what happened. Who hurt you? Can you tell us?" Silence stretched, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. Defense attorney Reynolds smirked slightly. Same result, different setting. The girl couldn't speak. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his voice grandfatherly. "Emma, sweetheart, we just want to know if you're okay. Can you tell us what happened at home?" More silence. Emma's lip trembled. Her small body began to shake again. Marcus whispered, "Please, baby. Please tell them Daddy didn't hurt you." And that's when Sarah saw it, the flash of terror in Emma's eyes at the sound of a male voice. But it wasn't directed at Marcus. It was directed at someone behind him. Sarah's detective instincts fired. She scanned the gallery, looking for whoever had triggered that response. Emma's breathing became rapid again. Kane sensed the change immediately and pressed harder against her legs, providing pressure, providing comfort. The word was barely audible, more breath than sound. The entire courtroom leaned forward. "What was that?" Judge Thompson asked gently. Emma's hand fisted in Kane's fur. Her other hand lifted, trembling, pointing. "Hurt." And the finger pointed past Marcus, past the defense table, straight into the gallery. Straight at Bobby Sullivan. Time stopped. In that frozen moment, every person in courtroom 6 followed Emma's trembling finger, past her father, past the defense table, past the prosecutor, straight to the man sitting in the first row of the gallery, the man who'd been at every hearing, every motion, every conference. Bobby Sullivan. Marcus's best friend since college. The man who'd stood as best man at his wedding. The man who'd brought him cigarettes in jail and promised to take care of his family. The man who'd sworn on his mother's grave that he'd find out who hurt Emma. That man. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. The accusation was so unexpected, so impossible that minds couldn't process it. Then the courtroom exploded. "Bobby!" Marcus's scream tore through the silence like a gunshot. He lunged from his seat, his shackles clanking. "Bobby, what did you do?" 2 bailiffs immediately restrained Marcus, pinning him against the defense table. His face was a mask of disbelief, rage, and heartbreak all twisted together. Bobby Sullivan stood so fast his bench seat slammed backward. His face had gone from pale to crimson. "She's 3 years old," he shouted, his voice cracking. "She doesn't know what she's saying. She's confused. Marcus, buddy, you know me." "Sit down, Mr. Sullivan." Judge Thompson's gavel cracked like thunder. "Bailiffs, secure that man." But Sullivan was already moving, shoving past people in the gallery row, trying to reach the aisle. A bailiff intercepted him, grabbing his arm. Sullivan jerked free, wild-eyed, desperate. "Get your hands off me. This is insane. That little girl is lying." At the witness stand, Emma began to scream. Not words, just pure, primal terror. The sound was inhuman, the sound of a child reliving her worst nightmare. She tried to climb out of the witness box, tried to run, but her legs wouldn't work. Kane reacted instantly. The German shepherd stood and placed his body between Emma and the chaos, a living shield. When Emma collapsed to her knees, Kane moved with her, pressing his full weight against her shaking body, using deep pressure therapy to ground her in the present moment. Detective Sarah Mitchell vaulted over the railing separating the gallery from the well of the court. Her training took over, years of police work, hundreds of domestic calls, countless traumatized victims. She reached Emma in seconds, positioning herself so the child was completely blocked from Sullivan's view. "Emma, look at me. Look at Kane," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority. "You're safe. He can't hurt you. Kane won't let anyone hurt you." Emma's screams subsided into gasping sobs. Her arms wrapped around Kane's neck, her face buried in his fur, her entire body convulsing with terror and relief and the weight of finally telling the truth. Margaret Martinez pushed through the crowd, falling to her knees beside her granddaughter. "Oh God, Emma, oh my baby, I'm so sorry we didn't know." 2 more bailiffs had Sullivan now, 1 on each arm. He was still fighting, still shouting. "This is ridiculous. I've been here every day supporting Marcus. I've been trying to help. That child is traumatized and pointing at random people." But his protests rang hollow. Everyone in the courtroom saw what Sarah saw, the sweat pouring down his face, the wild panic in his eyes, the physical attempt to flee. Innocent men didn't run. Prosecutor James Chen's mind was already racing through next steps. He pulled out his phone, texting rapid-fire messages to his investigative team. "Get a warrant for Robert Sullivan's residence now. Full forensic team. Computer, phone, everything." Marcus had stopped struggling against the bailiffs. He stood motionless, his face ashen, his world crumbling around him. "Bobby," he whispered, his voice broken. "You were my brother, You said you'd help find who did this. You visited me every week. Understanding crashed over him like a wave. "You volunteered to babysit. You had keys to my house. You were there all those times Lisa and I had marriage counseling." The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Sullivan's struggles intensified. "You're believing a 3-year-old over me, over 20 years of friendship. Marcus, tell them I'd never." "Get him out of my sight," Judge Thompson ordered, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. In 3 decades on the bench, he'd seen evil, but this, a predator masquerading as a friend, positioning himself to watch his victim's family suffer while he walked free. This was a new level of depravity. As bailiffs dragged Sullivan toward the side door that led to holding cells, he made one last desperate play. Emma, sweetheart, remember what I told you. Remember our special secret. If you tell, Daddy goes away forever. Is that what you want?" The courtroom went dead silent. Those words, that threat, everyone heard it. Emma's sobs intensified, but through her tears she nodded. "Bad man," she choked out, her voice muffled against Kane's fur. "Bad man hurt Emma. Told, don't tell." It was the most she'd spoken in 187 days. Sarah felt tears streaming down her own face, but she kept her voice steady. "That's right, sweetheart, but you did tell. You were so brave. And now the bad man can't hurt you anymore." Sullivan's face transformed. The mask of the concerned friend finally dropped, revealing the predator beneath. His lip curled. "You little." A bailiff's hand clamped over his mouth before he could finish. They hauled him through the door, his muffled protests fading as he disappeared into the bowels of the courthouse. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Thompson removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. In 32 years, he'd never cried on the bench. Today was the first time. "This court will take a 30-minute recess. Mr. Chen, I want Mr. Sullivan charged with everything you can make stick, and get Mr. Martinez out of those shackles." "Your Honor," the defense attorney began. "Now, Mr. Reynolds, unless you'd like to explain to the media why you're objecting to freeing an innocent man." Reynolds sat down without another word. The courtroom erupted in noise. Reporters sprinting for the exits, gallery members shouting to each other, lawyers conferring frantically. But in the center of it all, in the witness box, there was an island of quiet. Emma, Kane, Sarah, and Margaret. "Can I see Daddy now?" Emma's voice was small, broken, but it was there. After 187 days of silence, she was speaking. Marcus was being unshackled by a bailiff, tears pouring down his face. He looked at his daughter with such desperate hope. "Emma, baby." But Emma hesitated. She'd spent 6 months believing her father would be taken away if she spoke. Sullivan's manipulation had been thorough, expert, evil. Sarah made a decision. "Kane, bring her to Daddy." The German shepherd understood. He stood, waiting for Emma to follow. When she gripped his vest, Kane walked slowly toward Marcus, the little girl clinging to him like a lifeline. The 5 feet between the witness box and the defense table felt like miles. Marcus dropped to his knees, making himself small, non-threatening. "Emma, Daddy's here. Daddy's always here. I'm so sorry you were scared. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you." Emma stopped 3 feet away, Kane between them. She looked at her father, really looked at him for the first time in months. The office lights caught the tears on Marcus's face, the devastation, but also the love. So much love. "Daddy didn't hurt me?" Emma asked, needing confirmation, needing to hear it out loud. "Never, baby. Daddy would never hurt you. Daddy loves you more than anything in the whole world." Emma processed this, her 3-year-old brain trying to understand betrayal and truth and safety. Then she looked down at Kane, as if asking permission. Kane's tail wagged once. Emma let go of the dog and stumbled forward into her father's arms. Marcus caught her, sobbing, holding his daughter for the first time in 8 months. "I've got you, baby. Daddy's got you. You're safe now. You're safe." Margaret joined them, wrapping her arms around both. A family reuniting in the ruins of betrayal. Sarah stood back, giving them space, her hand on Kane's head. The German shepherd sat calmly, watching his work complete itself. 13 children, 13 voices found, 13 monsters exposed. Prosecutor Chen approached Sarah quietly. "That dog just solved a case that 3 dozen detectives couldn't crack." "That dog," Sarah replied, "just saved a little girl's life." In the holding cell below the courthouse, Bobby Sullivan sat on a metal bench, his head in his hands. Within hours, police would execute search warrants. They'd find the children's clothing that didn't belong to him, the hidden camera files, the internet search history, the pattern of grooming and manipulation that stretched back years. But right now, in courtroom 6, Justice was a father holding his daughter, a grandmother's tears of relief, and a German shepherd who'd given a voiceless child the courage to speak. Emma pulled back from her father's embrace and looked around. "Where's Kane?" The dog approached immediately, and Emma threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you, Kane. You made me brave." Kane's tail wagged. He was just doing his job. The 30-minute recess stretched into 2 hours. Courtroom 6 had transformed from a place of judgment into a command center for a rapidly expanding criminal investigation. Prosecutor James Chen commandeered the judge's chambers, his phone pressed to his ear while 3 laptops displayed incoming warrant approvals and forensic team updates. "I want every device Sullivan owns," Chen barked into his phone. "Computers, tablets, phones, cameras, external drives, everything. And get a team to his apartment now. I don't care if you have to wake up every judge in Hamilton County." In the courthouse's private witness room, a space designed for victims and their families, Emma sat on a plush couch with Kane's head resting on her lap. Detective Sarah Mitchell sat across from them, along with Linda Chen, a specialist in child forensic interviewing who'd been rushed to the courthouse the moment Emma spoke. Margaret Martinez hovered nearby, one hand covering her mouth, fighting tears as her granddaughter's story emerged in fragments. Marcus had been allowed into the room despite protocol. Judge Thompson had taken one look at the broken man and decided that after 8 months of wrongful imprisonment, he'd earned the right to hear his daughter's truth. He sat beside Margaret, holding her hand, his face cycling through devastation, rage, and grief. Linda Chen's voice was gentle, practiced. She'd interviewed hundreds of child victims, and she knew the delicate balance between gathering evidence and re-traumatizing a witness. "Emma, you're doing so well. Can you tell me about the times Mr. Sullivan babysat you?" Emma's fingers twisted in Kane's fur. The dog remained perfectly still, a warm, steady anchor. "Mommy and Daddy fighted," Emma said, her grammar reflecting her age. "Daddy's friend said he helped, said he watched Emma so Mommy and Daddy could talk." Marcus's jaw clenched. The marriage counseling. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 months, he and Lisa had gone to therapy trying to save their relationship. Bobby had volunteered immediately. "Let me watch Emma," he'd said. "You two need to focus on each other." They'd been grateful. God, they'd been so grateful. "What happened when Mr. Sullivan watched you?" Linda asked. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said we play special games, secret games. Said if I tell, police take Daddy away forever and ever." Her eyes found Marcus. "I don't want Daddy gone." "I know, sweetheart, but Daddy's not going anywhere now. You can tell Ms. Linda everything." The story came in pieces over the next hour. Bobby Sullivan had been methodical, calculated, evil. He'd groomed Emma slowly, innocent tickling that became inappropriate touching. Special secrets that isolated her, threats disguised as concern. "If anyone finds out about our games, they'll think your daddy did it. Your daddy will go to jail." He'd been right. That's exactly what had happened. "The last time," Emma said, her voice barely audible, "he hurt me bad. I cried. He got scared. He put makeup on the boo-boos and told me say Daddy did it if anyone asked." Margaret's sob echoed through the room. "But you didn't say anything. You stopped talking completely." Emma nodded. "I saw him at home, at store, at places. He always watched Emma, always smiled. I was too scared." Sarah understood now. Sullivan hadn't just abused Emma. He'd positioned himself at the center of the investigation. He'd attended every court hearing, every family gathering. He'd visited Marcus in jail, gathering information, monitoring the case's progress. He'd isolated Emma through psychological terrorism, ensuring his victim was too traumatized to speak. Until Kane. "Emma," Linda said carefully, "were there other times before the bad hurt?" Emma nodded. "Many times when Mommy and Daddy fighted Bobby came, said he helping. 17 babysitting sessions over 3 months. 17 opportunities." The full scope of Sullivan's predation was becoming horrifically clear. Chen's phone buzzed with updates from the forensic team at Sullivan's apartment. His face went pale as he read. He stepped into the hallway where Detective Rodriguez waited. "Tell me you found something," Rodriguez said. "We found everything." Chen's voice was hollow. "Children's clothing, sizes 2T through 4T, none of it boys' clothing. Multiple items." He paused, his hand shaking. "Hidden camera equipment, external hard drives. Rodriguez, this isn't just about Emma. I think Sullivan's been doing this for years." Rodriguez felt his stomach turn. "How many victims?" "We won't know until the computer forensics team finishes, but—" Chen couldn't finish the sentence. Back in the interview room, Emma had grown tired. The emotional toll of finally speaking, of reliving her trauma, had exhausted the 3-year-old. She lay curled against Kane, her thumb in her mouth, her eyes heavy. "I think that's enough for today," Linda said softly. "Emma's been incredibly brave. We have what we need for charges." Marcus approached his daughter carefully, still afraid she might pull away. But Emma reached for him with one arm, the other remaining wrapped around Kane. "Daddy stay?" she asked sleepily. "Forever, baby. Daddy's never leaving you again." Sarah made a decision that bent protocol but felt absolutely right. "Kane can go home with you tonight. Emma needs him." Margaret's eyes widened. Is that allowed? I'm making it allowed. Kane's a professional. He knows how to help traumatized children transition. Emma's going to need support over the coming weeks as she processes everything. Kane can provide that. The decision was made. For the first time in his career, Kane would do an overnight stay with a victim. Sarah would accompany them, sleeping on the Martinez's couch, but Kane would stay with Emma. By 6 p.m., the charges had been filed. Robert James Sullivan faced 17 counts of child sexual abuse, multiple counts of child endangerment, witness intimidation, and evidence tampering. The bail hearing was scheduled for the following morning, but everyone knew Sullivan wasn't getting bail. In the county jail, Sullivan sat in an isolation cell, away from the general population. Word had already spread about what he'd done. Child abusers didn't fare well in jail. He'd need protective custody for however many decades he'd be imprisoned. His attorney had quit within an hour of reviewing the preliminary evidence. No lawyer wanted to be associated with this case. Marcus's release was processed by 7 p.m. The jail supervisor personally apologized, though they both knew it was inadequate. 8 months of an innocent man's life, stolen by his best friend's betrayal and manipulation. The media had descended on the courthouse like locusts. Innocent man freed after daughter identifies real abuser dominated every news outlet. Video of Kane entering the courthouse had gone viral. Police dog helps mute girl testify trended on social media. Interview requests flooded Sarah's department. But Sarah ignored all of it. She sat in Margaret's living room, watching Emma sleep peacefully for the first time in months. Kane curled protectively at the foot of her bed. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with Margaret, both of them drinking coffee despite the late hour, neither able to sleep. 22 years, Marcus said, his voice hollow. I've known Bobby for 22 years. We were roommates in college. He was the best man at my wedding. I trusted him with everything. How did I not see it? Because predators are excellent actors, Sarah said from the doorway. Sullivan isn't the first and he won't be the last. They position themselves close to families, gain trust, create opportunities. You didn't fail Emma. Sullivan is a practiced manipulator. But I should have protected her. You did, by letting her meet Kane, by supporting her testimony, by believing her when she finally spoke. That's protection, Marcus. That's love. Margaret wiped her eyes. What happens now? Now we build the case. The forensic team is processing Sullivan's electronics. Emma will need continued therapy, real therapy, with a trauma specialist. The trial will be in 6 to 8 months, but with Emma's testimony on record and the physical evidence we're finding, Sullivan will plead guilty to avoid a trial. Most do. How long will he get? Marcus asked. Decades with multiple victims, and we're finding evidence of others. He'll die in prison. The words should have brought satisfaction, but they only brought exhaustion. Justice didn't erase trauma. It didn't give back stolen innocence or lost time. But it was something. As midnight approached, Sarah checked on Emma one last time. The little girl slept deeply, one hand buried in Kane's fur. The German shepherd's eyes opened as Sarah entered, but he didn't move, unwilling to disturb his charge. Good boy, Sarah whispered. You saved her, Kane. You saved all of them. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, identifying other victims, building an airtight case, supporting Emma through months of healing. But tonight, a little girl who'd been silent for 187 days slept peacefully, protected by the hero with 4 paws who'd given her back her voice. The Cincinnati Police Department's computer forensics lab had been working nonstop for 72 hours. Detective James Rodriguez stood outside the secure facility, drinking his 5th coffee of the day, dreading what senior analyst Michelle Park was about to tell him. She emerged from the lab at 3 a.m., her face gray with exhaustion and horror. You're going to want to sit down for this. How many? Rodriguez asked, already knowing the answer would devastate him. 7, Michelle's voice cracked. 7 children that we can identify so far, ages 3 to 8. The files go back 4 years. Rodriguez, the organization, the planning. This man is a monster. The external hard drives from Bobby Sullivan's apartment had revealed a nightmare. Meticulously organized folders, each labeled with a child's first name and age. Photos, videos, notes detailing each child's vulnerabilities, their family situations, the opportunities Sullivan had engineered. Emma wasn't Sullivan's first victim. She wasn't even his most recent. She was simply the one brave enough, with Kane's help, to finally point at him. By sunrise, Rodriguez had assembled a task force. 7 families needed to be notified. 7 children needed protection and support. 7 cases needed to be built, even though Emma's testimony alone would put Sullivan away for life. The first family they contacted was the Johnsons. Their 6-year-old daughter, Lily, had shown behavioral changes 18 months ago: nightmares, bedwetting, sudden fear of men. They'd taken her to therapists, changed schools, tried everything, never suspecting that their neighbor, the friendly single guy who'd helped them move furniture and occasionally watched Lily when emergencies arose, was the source of her terror. Mr. Sullivan, Jennifer Johnson's face went white when Rodriguez showed her the evidence. But he brought Lily birthday presents. He seemed so kind. That's how predators work, Mrs. Johnson. They build trust, create opportunities, and rely on that trust to keep victims silent. Lily, when gently interviewed by Linda Chen with a facility dog named Rex, confirmed everything. Sullivan had abused her during 5 babysitting sessions. She tried to tell her parents once, but Sullivan had been there, watching, smiling. Lily had seen the warning in his eyes and gone silent. The pattern repeated with each family. Sullivan had positioned himself perfectly: helpful neighbor, family friend, volunteer youth soccer coach. He'd isolated vulnerable children, created opportunities, and used psychological manipulation to ensure silence. But Emma's courage had shattered his carefully constructed world. By day 4, Sullivan's attorney, his third, after 2 others quit, delivered the news Chen had been expecting. My client wishes to enter a guilty plea to all charges in exchange for concurrent sentencing and protective custody. Chen's response was immediate. No deal. Your client goes away for consecutive sentences on every count, every victim. He serves his time in general population like everyone else. Or we go to trial and I make sure every detail of what he did is read into public record. The attorney blanched. General population meant Sullivan would be targeted by other inmates. Child abusers were the lowest rung in prison hierarchy. That's a death sentence, the attorney protested. Then he should have thought about that before he destroyed 7 children's lives, Chen replied coldly. Those are my terms. Take them or face trial. Sullivan took the deal. He had no choice. The evidence was overwhelming. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later, giving prosecutors time to prepare victim impact statements and giving families time to decide if they wanted to participate. Emma's healing during those 6 weeks was remarkable, with Kane visiting 3 times a week and intensive therapy with Dr. Patricia Chen, no relation to the prosecutor. The little girl who'd been silent for 187 days was becoming herself again. She still had nightmares. She still struggled with certain triggers, men with beards like Sullivan's, the cologne he'd worn. But she was laughing again, playing again, singing Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star off-key while Kane listened with patient attention. Marcus had been freed completely, all charges dropped with prejudice. The county had offered him a settlement for wrongful imprisonment, $250,000 that would help rebuild his life. It wasn't enough, would never be enough, but it was something. He and Lisa were in intensive marriage counseling. The strain of the false accusations, the months of separation, the betrayal by their best friend, it had nearly destroyed them. But Emma needed both her parents, and they were fighting to save their family. The case made national headlines. Police dog helps expose serial child abuser, ran on every major network. Cain appeared on Good Morning America with Sarah, though the segment focused on facility dogs generally rather than the specific details of Emma's case. The publicity had an unexpected effect. 3 more victims came forward. Children Sullivan had abused years ago before he'd perfected his system. They'd been too afraid to speak, convinced no one would believe them. But Emma's courage had given them courage. 10 victims total. 10 children whose lives had been forever altered by one predator's evil. Judge Thompson received letters from across the country, parents thanking Emma for her bravery, advocacy groups requesting information about facility dog programs, police departments asking how to implement similar strategies. Emma's case was changing the system. Sarah found herself overwhelmed with requests for Cain's services. Prosecutors from 3 states wanted to know if Cain could help their witnesses. The Ohio Attorney General's office proposed funding for 10 more facility dogs across the state. Cain, for his part, remained blissfully unaware of his celebrity status. He continued his work, helping a 7-year-old boy testify against his uncle, supporting a teenage girl through a rape trial, providing comfort to a 5-year-old who'd witnessed domestic violence. 13 cases had become 14. 14 had become 20. Each child found their voice because a German shepherd showed them what unconditional safety felt like. The night before Sullivan's sentencing, Sarah took Cain to visit Emma one last time before the hearing. The little girl had grown so much in 6 weeks, taller, brighter, more confident. She greeted Cain with squeals of delight, throwing her arms around his neck. "I have a surprise," Emma announced, pulling Sarah into her bedroom. On the wall hung a crayon drawing of a large brown dog with a cape. Above it, in Margaret's careful handwriting, read, "Cain, my hero." "Do you like it?" Emma asked. "I drawed it myself." "I love it," Sarah said, her throat tight. "Cain loves it too." Emma looked serious suddenly. "Tomorrow is the bad man day." Sarah knelt down. "Tomorrow the judge decides how long Mr. Sullivan stays in jail. You don't have to go if you don't want to." "Will Cain be there?" "If you want him to be." Emma thought about this, her small face contemplative. Then she nodded firmly. "I go, I'm brave now. Cain made me brave." "No, sweetheart," Sarah corrected gently. "You were always brave. Cain just helped you remember." That night, 7 families prepared victim impact statements. 7 children, with their parents' support, made the impossible decision to face their abuser one last time. Emma would speak first, the youngest victim, the one whose voice had started the cascade that brought a predator down. Marcus helped Emma pick out a dress for court, purple, her favorite color now instead of yellow. Yellow reminded her of the dress she'd worn that first day. Purple was new. Purple was brave. "You don't have to do this, baby," Marcus said as he braided her hair. "You've already been so brave." "I want to," Emma replied with the certainty only a 3-year-old could muster. "I want to tell the judge Bobby is bad, so he can't hurt more kids." In his cell, Bobby Sullivan lay awake, knowing tomorrow would seal his fate. 47 years old, looking at 175 years in prison on consecutive sentences. He'd never breathe free air again. He tried to claim mental illness, addiction, childhood trauma, any excuse. But the evidence showed calculation, planning, predation. He'd known exactly what he was doing. And tomorrow, his victims would make sure everyone else knew too. As midnight passed, Emma slept peacefully with her stuffed rabbit, dreaming of purple dresses and German shepherds with capes. Cain slept in Sarah's apartment, his vest hanging by the door, ready for one more mission. Tomorrow, justice would speak with the voices of children. And it would sound like thunder. The Hamilton County Courthouse looked different on sentencing day. Where chaos had reigned 6 weeks ago, now there was a strange calm, the quiet before justice finally speaks. Courtroom 6 was packed again, but the energy had shifted. Media still lined the halls, but they kept respectful distance. The gallery held not just curious observers but advocates, therapists, police officers, and 7 families united by shared trauma and emerging hope. Emma Martinez walked through the courthouse doors at 9:15 a.m., holding her father's hand on one side and her mother's on the other. Lisa Martinez had taken leave from her nursing job to be present, to support her daughter, to reclaim their family from the wreckage Sullivan had created. But Emma's eyes searched for only one face. There, she broke free and ran toward Detective Sarah Mitchell, who stood near the courtroom entrance with Kane sitting calmly beside her. The German shepherd's tail began wagging the moment he saw Emma, his brown eyes lighting with recognition. Emma crashed into Kane with the fearless joy of a child who'd rediscovered safety. She'd grown in 6 weeks, not just physically, but in confidence, in voice, in the way she moved through the world. The terrified, silent girl was being replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd walked through fire and emerged on the other side. "You ready, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, adjusting Kane's courthouse vest. Emma nodded solemnly. "I'm ready. I'm going to tell the judge everything." Inside the courtroom, Bobby Sullivan sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by 2 armed guards. He'd aged decades in 6 weeks. His hair had gone gray. His face was gaunt. But worse than the physical changes was the look in his eyes, empty, defeated, the look of a man who knew his life was over. He didn't look at the families as they entered, didn't acknowledge the children he'd destroyed. He stared straight ahead, a coward to the end. Judge Thompson entered and the courtroom rose. The judge had presided over thousands of cases, but this one had changed him. He'd requested the assignment personally, wanting to see it through to the end. "This court will come to order," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of what was to come. "We are here for the sentencing of Robert James Sullivan, who has pleaded guilty to 47 counts of child sexual abuse, child endangerment, witness intimidation, and related charges across 10 victims. 47 counts, the number hung in the air like smoke. "Before I pronounce sentence," Judge Thompson continued, "the victims and their families have the right to be heard. We'll begin with Emma Martinez." Sarah led Emma to the witness stand, Kane at her side. The little girl wore her purple dress and had insisted on wearing her fancy shoes, sparkly sneakers that lit up when she walked. Somehow, those light-up shoes made the moment even more poignant. A child, still so young, forced to confront adult evil. Emma climbed onto the witness stand with Kane settling at her feet. She looked tiny up there, but she didn't look afraid. Judge Thompson leaned forward. "Emma, you can say whatever you want to say. Take your time." Emma looked at Kane first, her hand reaching down to touch his head. Then she looked directly at Bobby Sullivan for the first time since pointing at him 6 weeks ago. "You hurt me," she said, her voice small but clear. "You hurt me, and you said bad things would happen if I told. You said police would take my daddy away forever." Her voice grew stronger. "But you were wrong. My daddy didn't go away. You're going away." The courtroom was silent, except for muffled sobs from the gallery. "You're a bad man," Emma continued, her 3-year-old vocabulary unable to capture the full scope of Sullivan's evil but somehow perfect in its simplicity. "You hurt lots of kids, but we told. We were brave. And now you can't hurt nobody never again." Sullivan's shoulders shook. Whether from remorse or self-pity, no one could tell. No one cared. "I have a best friend now," Emma said, looking down at Kane with pure love. "His name is Kane, and he's a hero dog. He helped me be brave. He helped me tell the truth." She looked back at Sullivan. "And the truth is you're bad and you're going to jail forever and ever." Marcus wiped tears from his eyes. Lisa held Margaret's hand, both women crying silently. Emma wasn't finished. "I'm not scared anymore. Cain teached me that bad people can't hurt you if you tell the truth, so I'm telling the truth. You hurt me, but I'm okay now. And you're not okay, you're going to jail." With that, Emma climbed down from the witness stand, her light-up shoes flashing with each step. She'd said what she came to say. 6 more children followed over the next 2 hours. Lily Johnson, now 7, read from a prepared statement with her mother's help. 10-year-old Michael Chen spoke about the nightmares that still woke him up. Each testimony was devastating. Each testimony was necessary. Each child had a facility dog beside them: Cain, Rex, Bella, and others. The courthouse had rapidly expanded its program after Emma's case made national headlines. Finally, it was Judge Thompson's turn to speak. "Mr. Sullivan," he began, his voice like granite, "in 32 years on this bench, I have seen humanity at its worst. But you represent a special kind of evil. You didn't just abuse children. You manipulated, calculated, and positioned yourself to continue your predation while watching families suffer." Sullivan kept his eyes down. "You befriended parents to access their children. You attended court hearings to monitor your victim. You let an innocent man sit in jail for months to protect yourself. There is no sentence adequate for what you've done, but I will give you the maximum the law allows." Judge Thompson's gavel punctuated each count. "On each of the 47 counts, I sentence you to 20 years to be served consecutively. That's 940 years in prison, Mr. Sullivan. You will never know freedom again. You will die in prison, and the world will be safer for it." The gavel fell one final time. "Take him away." As bailiffs led Sullivan out a side door, Emma turned to her parents. "Is it over?" "It's over, baby," Marcus said, lifting her into his arms. "The bad man is gone forever." But really, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. 6 months later, Emma Martinez sat in her kindergarten classroom during show and tell, holding a framed photograph. "This is my best friend Cain," she told her classmates. "He's a police dog who helps scared kids be brave. He helped me when I was really, really scared." Her teacher, who knew Emma's story, smiled encouragingly. "Now I'm not scared anymore," Emma continued. "And when I grow up, I'm going to be a police officer with a dog just like Cain, so I can help other scared kids too." At the Cincinnati Police Department K-9 unit, Cain was receiving his second commendation. Emma's case had sparked a revolution in victim advocacy. Ohio now had 47 facility dogs, one for each count Sullivan had been convicted of, as Judge Thompson had suggested. Other states were following suit. Cain, now 4 years old, had helped 38 children find their voices. He'd been featured in Time magazine, on 60 Minutes, and in a children's book called Cain the Brave that taught kids about speaking up against abuse. But Cain didn't know he was famous. He just knew that when scared children needed him, he was there. Sarah had been promoted to head the statewide facility dog program. She spent her days training new handlers, evaluating potential facility dogs, and ensuring that every traumatized child in Ohio had access to the support they needed. The Martinez family had fully healed. Marcus and Lisa's marriage was stronger than ever, forged in the fire of their shared nightmare. They'd become advocates, speaking at schools about recognizing predatory behavior, about believing children, about the importance of facility dog programs. Emma thrived. She still saw Dr. Chen weekly, still had occasional nightmares, still remembered what happened. Trauma doesn't disappear, but she'd learned to live with it, to grow beyond it, to transform her pain into purpose. On Emma's 4th birthday, Sarah brought Cain for a special visit. The little girl who'd once been too terrified to speak now chattered constantly, telling Cain about preschool, her new baby brother, her plans to become a dog police officer. "You saved my life," Emma said seriously, hugging Cain's neck. "You're my hero forever." But the truth, as Sarah knew, was more complex. Emma had saved herself. Cain had simply shown her that she could. In the photograph that still hung in Judge Thompson's chambers, Emma wore her purple dress and Cain wore his vest, both sporting medals from the Ohio Attorney General's office. But more important than the medals was the expression on Emma's face: pure joy, absolute safety, complete trust. That photograph had inspired 127 other jurisdictions to start facility dog programs. It had changed laws in 14 states. It had given hope to thousands of traumatized children who thought they'd never find their voices. One little girl, one police dog, one moment of courage. And the world became a little bit safer. Emma Martinez was 4 years old now, singing off-key in her kindergarten class, dreaming of the day she'd have her own cane. The nightmares still came sometimes, but so did the dreams. Dreams of helping other kids, of being brave, of making the world better. Bobby Sullivan was in maximum security prison, where he would remain until he died. His name became synonymous with betrayal and evil, but more importantly, his victims' names became synonymous with courage. And Cain continued his work, one child at a time, one voice at a time, one miracle at a time. Because some heroes wear badges, some wear fur, and some, like Emma Martinez, wear light-up sneakers and purple dresses, their voices ringing out with the truth that changes everything. I'm not scared anymore. The end.